Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
I see it, and I'm seeing a lot more of recent research speaking to the fact that we really are on a spectrum, and we need to be able to use both tendencies or types or whatever, introverted and extroverted is actually describing a personality type or part of our personality. We need to be able to tap into both. And what I've learned through this research is that, and this research and honestly just leaning into it, is that introverts seem to be more misunderstood, which was certainly the case on my part. And, as I was learning more, but extroverts are also, to me, more often stereotyped.
Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan, and this is my co-host, Danelle, live from New York City.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm here in quite warm New York.
Warm New York compared to what? Like compared to 110 in Dallas, or?
No, I know it's warm everywhere, but it's a little sultry in the city, but I'll take it. I'll take it all day.
Absolutely. It's a great place to be. So today, listeners, we're hosting our first, you've probably surmised that by now, we're hosting our first fully remote podcast. So having a little grace for us would be appreciated. We've not done this before, but we do intend to have more guests from wherever. And so we want to be sure that this works and that Danelle and I are technically able to navigate it. We know that our production team can do it. It's just a matter of can we do it? So here we go. It's weird to be back on Zoom. We do still do a lot of things remotely, but Zoom was so weird for us when we started the pandemic. It's just now.
We didn't start the pandemic.
No. When we started in the pandemic at work, like getting on Zoom was so awkward. And now we're having a podcast on it. Like it's gotten to be such a norm just from the difference between day one to day, whatever we are now. And Zoom is just a part of our lives, even our podcast life. Like who would have ever thought?
I know. Yeah, but we were a little rusty. At least I was a little rusty getting set up remotely. So
same. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I was so rusty too, but here we are. And we're gonna talk about an awesome topic today, introverts and extroverts. And here it's a big topic at DMA. So we felt like maybe it might be something that you might want to listen to us chat more about. And speaking of introverts and extroverts, you just so happen to be in a location that is primo for extroverts.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, New York, if you're talking about the stereotype, New York, if you're going to give New York a personality, it's definitely extroverted. But I find it to be a place where if you want to be in a more inward space, that there's plenty of ways to do that too. So there's, you can navigate the city to benefit you wherever you are in relative to being introverted or extroverted, but it is definitely an extrovert's city for sure.
And our team loves it when you're there because you come up with a lot of creative ideas. I mean, okay, wait, let me back up. We love it. We love it when you're here, Danelle, and there's something extra special about when you're in New York City because you have just a lot of creativity, you meet interesting people, and your stories are always so much fun. So
yeah, I'm not short on that. I've been here for a while and plan on spending a lot more time in the city. And I find incredible creative energy and just with, me exploring what I want to do with my time. And this next chapter, as we've talked a lot about on previous episodes, I have the blessing of being able to move forward and down some new paths. And I love it here. I find myself thinking outside of the box, and I definitely meet a lot of people, whether I want to or not, it seems.
Right.
And
they
so
find you.
I have a treasure chest of stories that are piling up that I can't wait to share with you and the team. So
good. We can't wait. We love them. They're funny and then sometimes serious and then sometimes scary. So we'll look forward to that. And before we get moving into introverts and extroverts, we'd love to run the commercial. Before we start, let me just say that I don't know how we'd make it a day at our company without the help of our trusty IT services partner. Mobi Systems has been our IT partner for years, and they keep us connected when computers crash and networks go haywire. The team at Mobi is super helpful and understanding of people who don't know what the heck to do when equipment goes south. What I know for sure is that without them, we wouldn't be able to run our business as seamlessly as we do. With Mobi Systems in your corner, you have peace of mind that they keep an eye on your company and its IT assets. We're offering our listeners a huge bonus to sign up with Mobi Systems. Here's the deal. Our listeners will get their first month's service absolutely free, along with additional goodies. For more information, please visit mobisystems.com. That's MOBE systems.com. And be sure to mention Self Smarter for your first month free. Okay, Danelle, are you introverted or extroverted? Inquiring minds would like to know.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that I'm extroverted. And what I can't wait to talk about more today, we've learned so much about introverts and extroverts, and this kind of goes, towards our commitment of self-knowledge and self-discovery. And I'm definitely extroverted, but what I've learned, and I'm still deeply learning, especially as I progress as a leader and I progress in this stage of my life, is that introvertedness can serve me extremely well. And so that is a little bit more intentional on my part. And so I know that, again, I think we're probably born with a tendency one way or the other. And I know that if we are in a healthy space, we should be looking to explore both to our benefit. So
if I don't know which one I am, I do know which one I am, but I'm saying if I'm listening and I don't know which one I am, is there a test or something that you recommend I do in order to determine if I'm introverted or extroverted?
Yeah, here's what I think. I think people instinctively know because the definitions of them are both easy, and I think people self-assess it. But what I like about the tests that are out there is they go deeper. So the most popular one is Myers-Briggs and personalities tests, and most people know that. We've both taken that test, and there's a sequence of letters that you get. There's 4 sequence of letters, and they mean different things. But the first letter in this sequence is extroverted or introverted, and so it goes a lot deeper than that. And the test is, I find the test to be very, very intense. The Myers-Briggs, but I do think it serves one well to know that. And then we'll talk about another personality test that we came across that I found to be very helpful in doing research for this. So,
and guess
we'll talk
what?
about that in a sec.
It's not the Enneagram. I know that's a first, but it is not the Enneagram, nor will the Enneagram tell you if you're introverted or extroverted. So I know we talk a lot about the Enneagram. People love the Enneagram. We do too. However, if introversion or extroversion is what you're trying to determine, that's not necessarily going to give you the answer.
Correct.
So in your mind, Danelle, what's the real difference? And I know you have a real strong opinion on this, and this is along with our cultural development at DMA and of course, people leadership. You've really learned how to identify these things to help you become a better leader, a business leader. So in your opinion, what's the real difference between introverts and extroverts?
Again, I will define that the way that I know it to be true. Okay. And then I think what we need to do is give some context as to, the experts that are out there and what they say about the two. And then I think we can then dive into our own experience and what we've learned on this journey. But introverts focus more inward into their own thoughts, whereas extroverts focus outward into the world. And so that's like the basic difference between the two. And I would like our listeners to really start at the beginning of this podcast, as we do with this topic, is there is a spectrum. If severe, not severely, but if drastic introvert is at one end and drastic extrovert is at the other, I think what we want to do is really think about it as being somewhere along the spectrum in between the two extremes. So
okay.
I think that's very helpful. And according to Myers-Briggs, the following are classic behaviors of an introvert. So let's start with introverts. They see themselves as reflective and reserved. They're typically more comfortable being alone and like to do things on their own. Again, these are descriptions, general descriptions. In terms of relationship, less is more. And they find themselves investing in fewer people in their lives. And that's, again, they don't necessarily need a certain number of friends to fill their tank, or people in their lives. They spend time in reflection and might describe themselves as unable to move into action quickly. And others may describe them that way as well. And they might describe themselves as forgetting to check with the outside world to see if their ideas really fit the experience. So again, as they spend a lot of time inward with their thoughts and with their actions, it's very important for them to check in with others to make sure that there's a connection there. So those are some general descriptions of introverts from Myers-Briggs.
What's so interesting about introverts, and I know you're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but I was looking for video clips or just fun things to share about introverts. There's a ton of stuff out there. And so if you think about, like when I think about the difference between an extrovert and an introvert, an extrovert's like the comedian on the stage, like telling the jokes. The introverts are the ones that are like, they've got these like videos on Instagram that are on YouTube or Instagram that are like hilarious, and these crazy memes that are so funny. So it's almost like they're like quietly doing it versus standing on a stage doing it. I just think that's so interesting. But we'll share a couple of those videos and memes for you, just for your enjoyment.
Yeah, in the show notes for sure, because I think the videos are a great way to, especially if you're addressing this with your team and you're really looking to dive into this topic more. It's fun to bring some of that creative, the humorous side of the two personality types. So I think that they were enjoyable. So definitely give them a check. Definitely look into them. But I would also say, relative to introverts, as being a very extroverted leader for most of my life, or extroverted person, and then ultimately leader, we had a watershed moment relative to introverts, and we had the opportunity of hearing Susan Cain. She's one of the foremost authors on talking about introverts. She wrote the famous book Quiet. And so we got to see her speak at a marketing conference. And it was the first time for me where I was able to really think about introverts in what I would say in a healthy way. And because what it seemed to me is, I felt like both personality types, we could use what we know to loosely be true, or what's stereotypical about an introvert or an extrovert, as being an excuse. And because I understood being what extroverted meant more so, it was really good for me to understand really how introverts are wired. And I could sense that I was putting some stereotypes that were actually quite untrue. And so it really helped me at that time, because I think that was probably, it could have been close to 10 years ago, really helped me to, at the time, understand two of our former, our leaders at our company, Marcy and Mackenzie, are both introverts. And I understood them more than I had before. And so I think it's really important that we seek to understand the differences in the two, and honestly, where they can cross over. So I just wanted to point that out, that there's a lot of great learnings out there relative to both types.
Yeah, at a high level, it can help add some clarity, bring some clarity to a lot of differences. Like at a very top, very high level, like I think you and I both were like, oh, during that presentation, like that's
it's like I
why.
wanted to go up and hug Marcy and Mackenzie and be like, sorry.
Yes.
I got a few things wrong.
Yes.
I see you.
You did. I think you came home and I don't know that you said it that way, but I think you were like, oh my gosh, this really helped me understand you more. So Thank you for sharing. The fact that they were even sharing the differences prior to us seeing Susan and hearing Susan speak was helpful, because during the presentation we were like, got it. We could compare. Absolutely. So let's talk about something that Susan Cain didn't talk too much about, and that is extroverts.
That's such an extroverted thing to say.
Because that's all we really wanted to hear about is extroverts. I mean, I'm just being honest. All right, Danelle, tell us a little bit about extroverts.
Okay, so extroverts are seen as outgoing, or can be seen as a people person. They're comfortable in groups and like working with them. They have a wide range of friends typically, and know lots of people. And sometimes they jump too quickly into an activity and do not allow enough time to think. And so I think we both can relate to that.
Yes, we can. Fortunately, unfortunately.
And it's so interesting too, when we were doing this research, and I found this to be true before, is that when you do research on introverts and extroverts, the research, or the subject matters or the book titles are very different.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also different, not in terms of the amount of information that's out there. There's a lot more information on introverts out there, which is just so interesting to me. And the types of titles and articles that are written about the two, when they're written about separately, they're so vastly different. And I think, again, if you're thinking about it in terms of it being a spectrum, you know, I see it, and I'm seeing a lot more of recent research speaking to the fact that we really are on a spectrum, and we need to be able to use both tendencies or types or whatever, you know, introverted and extroverted is actually describing a personality type or part of our personality. We need to be able to tap into both. And what I know, what I've learned through this research is that, and this research, and honestly just leaning into it, is that introverts seem to be more misunderstood, which was certainly the case on my part. And, you know, as I was learning more, but extroverts are also, to me, more often stereotyped. So we're very easy as extroverts to be stereotyped. And then introverts just seem to be a little bit more misunderstood. And it's interesting because the research that's out there, or the resources, I should say, I keep saying research, but the resources that are out there really reflect this. And so if you're interested, just type in a Google search that says, you know, books on introvertedness or books on extrovertedness, and see what it comes up with. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And when I was doing some research, I found this quote, and I love it. It's like, extroverts sparkle and introverts glow. And I love that because it's true. Both are great. Both possess incredible qualities, but it's like with anything else relative to how we show up. If we don't understand when we can tip over from being showing up in a great way and showing up in another way, if we're not conscious of that and fully understand that, we can, you know, we can run into some issues with others or with the groups that we're serving. So I just wanted to share that realization that, wow, there's a lot of different approaches to studying the two.
Love it. Love the sparkle and glow. That's a great way to describe it. And I can visually see it in my head. So that always helps. So relative to leadership and people, let's talk about how leaders can integrate different personality types and styles to ensure that they're, you know, managing a productive work environment for both introverts and extroverts.
Yeah, I think it's important that that leaders really understand the differences between how extroverted people and introverted people really perform, because behaviorally they have different needs in the workplace. And so when we know the differences and when we know how each is wired, then we can create more motivational environments where both can not only excel but function well together. And, you know, that has certainly been the case for us.
So if I'm a leader, I am a leader. If I'm a leader, yes. If I'm a leader, hypothetically speaking, what could I do to try to discern the difference between the people that are on my team? Like, what advice do you have for me to first identify, just to become more aware and then to synergize the two?
Yeah, I think we found a great resource in Harvard Business Review that I think is to answer that question and to really help our listeners. And so we'll just borrow from there and then speak to that, how we've been able to implement these into our own organization with our own teams. But first and foremost is educate yourself. And again, I'm repeating here, but know the difference between extroverts and introverts, and continue to expect excellence, but also consider altering your approach for the two types. So when we say, don't allow excellence to be ignored because of one personality type may dominate your team versus the other. And I think that's really important, because you can find yourselves, easily as leaders, potentially in a position to, understand one group more than the other, because maybe for instance, if I'm an extrovert, I tend to understand how they're wired a lot more, but it's really important that we learn both. Mm-hmm. And, the differences in how extroverts show up, particularly with their work, and they could be a little bit more prompt with it. They can get things done a little bit quicker, and potentially quality could be sacrificed. Whereas introverts can tend to, sit with work and need to sit with their work a little bit more. So those things have to be factored into when we're looking at, for instance, deadlines or work quality, or how we're giving people the tools that they need to be most successful. So, and I think that also goes to say not only in the work, but we've learned it in our organization. It also applies to creative and social gatherings. And, we've definitely experienced multiple versions of that at DMA.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you just said that, because we're in the midst of that right now, where we have, you and I typically lead these types of social gatherings in the office. And of course, we love the happy hour. We love the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock happy hour, and we want to party all night long. Where in contrast, 50% of the organization is introverted. And they said, in your engagement poll, I think you did a question about this in Tiny Pulse, and they said, actually, we'd like to reel that in a little bit, maybe have a nice intimate family lunch with really good food and nice conversation with one another, where we don't have to have a big party in the afternoon, which you and I thought was so odd, just because we're extroverts. We're like, wait, what? Like, how do you celebrate without a party? And they're like, but this is the party. It's about being together. So where extroverts gravitate towards groups, and we think out loud, introverts typically dislike a lot of noise and big group settings. So don't be surprised if you have a happy hour and people are like not wanting to come to it, or the extroverts are ready to rock and roll all night long and the introverts are going home and go to bed really early. So it's just so interesting how different we are, but how that plays out from a cultural setting.
Yeah. And I think it's just, again, educating yourself and being aware. And I think that segues into the second tip from HBR, is to talk to your team and ask good questions. And again, as we, recommended, you can definitely take the Myers-Briggs test, or another one that we're going to share with you, to find out really where people skew. And I think it's interesting, because I think sometimes it's interesting that we've noticed that introverts, because they can show up, they've taught themselves to show up in an extroverted way, and it's really not how they're wired, but maybe it's their maturity, or they've been forced to show up in a particular way in a particular role. But honestly, what really fuels them on the inside is more of the introverted time, or the introverted tendencies. And so I think the test really help you, because I think people can, again, I think we can overemphasize. People may see me now that are new to the organization and being like, man, Danelle is an she wants more time to herself, and she needs this self-reflection. Well, honestly, that's not how I'm wired, but I've been teaching myself to be more in that reflective space. And that, honestly, we have to mention the Enneagram, because that's just what we do. But I have to go to a 5 to really grow as a person, and so a 5 tends to be more on the Enneagram, tends to be more of an introverted person. So I've taught myself that. Now, the rest of you who've been with in the organization for longer know that I'm absolutely, I'm in a space of putting myself there, versus that's just naturally how I show up. So I think it's important for us, to leaders, to really ask good questions, take these assessments, and sit down with your team to learn more about them.
There was that test. What was were there different classifications on a test? Like, what am I going to find out if I take one of these tests?
So in addition to the Myers-Briggs, I would highly recommend, and we'll put the link in the show notes, but there's a test from Well and Good. Actually, it's from Psychology Today, but we found it in a Well and Good article. And it took about 20, 25 minutes for me to take the test. And what I liked about it is that it gave you 4 categories of how you show up relative to introvertedness or extrovertedness, and it broke it down into 4 key areas: social ability, a cognitive orientation, self-disclosure, and need for space. And it gave you a score from 0 to 100. And then it gave you an overall score, and I think it gave you a characteristic type. And so for me, I showed up anywhere from 30% to 60%. So that what that says is that I've learned I'm not, if I'm super extrovertedness, I would probably be 80 plus if extroverted is on one end, and which I know the extroverted was on the 100 and on the scale, and introverted being on the 0. And so it was just a really good way for me to see the evolution that I'm going through relative to both, is to see in these four categories where I ranked. And it was interesting, and it was like where I was most introverted was need for space, and I'm learning that again, as I've said. And so it was good to see it. But we'll put the link in the show notes, and I just think it's a great test, and you can take it for free, and it gives you a little bit of information. But for I think around $7, you can get the more detailed PDF. But I recommended it. I hadn't taken a test for extroverted introvertedness in a while. Like I said, I took the Myers-Briggs over 10 years ago. So it was good for me to get refreshed. And I enjoyed learning a little bit more about myself. So
what I liked about, you sent me your results. And what I liked about the results was I was surprised by them. Like I didn't expect to be quite so shocked with, you said they give you like a title, like a fun name to describe how you are. And you know what yours was?
The chameleon.
The chameleon, which I don't think of you as a chameleon at all. But what that tells me is the evolution with the recognition, to your point about I need introversion. At my very best, when I'm at my best, I've spent time intentionally being thoughtful with the things that I want to care about at the moment and need to care about a lot of times. And so look at you. You're all balanced out. Look at you.
I don't know about all, but I'm trying to get there. But we are definitely going to have the team take it. We like to take the assessments first to see if they're worthwhile. And I'm excited for the team to take this and have another tool in their toolbox. So it'll be a fun exercise. So
agreed. Okay. And then you also mentioned along with this one, in terms of talk to your team and ask good questions, you're the queen at asking good questions. So I just wondered if you had some ideas on the types of questions a leader might ask their team to help them discern whether or not they're introverted or extroverted.
Yeah, I don't think there's we don't have to really overthink it, but if you're thinking about questions that are going to equip you, I mean, it's, they're kind of simple, like how do you best like to work, or, explain or describe a setting where you're most productive and you do your best high quality work. Like, what does that look like? And don't be surprised if the answer sometimes can be, well, most of the time I like to work in a quiet space, but then there's times where I really need the interaction. And I think, again, the art of the follow-up question is, tell me more about that. So if you get a straightforward answer, is really seeking to say, well, if you ask them, what's their best work environment? And they say, I only like to work alone. Well, tell me more about that. Is that, how do you learn from others? And so I think it's just really seeking to help you understand more about them, but also, the art of asking good questions is also helping the person who's answering the question also come to more enlightened conclusions. And so that's why I think being curious about someone to begin with is important, and to be curious about how someone, sees themselves in their best way, but then also being curious enough to lead them into conversation that maybe goes a little bit deeper. And I think sometimes, leaders, we've got a lot on our plate. We've got, time is, a scarce resource. But I think it's super important that we find the time and the interest to really learn more about our team members and the people that we're leading.
And I'll say this is something that we've been able to do. I mean, I think somewhat effectively, because we have people who are willing to share, back to your revelation with Susan Cain, we heard the introverts say, listen, don't put me in if you want the best out of me, look, I want to give you my best. I'm here to do my best. First of all, I'm an achiever. And then secondly, if you want the best out of me, maybe don't put me in a high traffic like where people are walking back and forth and wanting to stop at my desk. So for anybody who visits our office right now, you'll notice, especially our leaders, we have positioned, not because of their ranking, we just have them sitting in places that are most conducive to them. So Mackenzie, you mentioned earlier, is an introvert. She sits in the back far corner, as far away as she possibly can. She's with people and she's with a group, but she doesn't have a lot of traffic walking by and distracting her at her desk. Whereas Lauren, who may be more extroverted than you and I put together, she's our public relations director.
We love that.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
She sits over kind of by the, like right by the kitchen and other conference room areas where people are literally walking by her all day long. And she's able to focus when she needs to focus. And then she's able to jump up and be like, hey, what's going on? You want a snack? I mean, and that literally is what she does all day.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
and she's super productive as a result of that. So just that difference right there has made the difference not only for me, you as a leader, their productivity, and then thus is our customers' productivity and our business's productivity, but it also shows our great intention and your intention to want to serve people in that way, serve them and give them what they need to be their true selves at work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a good segue into the third tip is to rethink the workday. And so, where people sit is one way, and where people thrive the most. I mean, those are things that sometimes are easier. It depends on the organization. It depends on the, honestly, your office space. So you might be limited to be able to do that to the extreme that we've been able to do it. But I mean, you can, when you're designing spaces, look at your team and really think about that relative to private workspaces, or where people are able to go to be in a group together or to work privately. And I know, when we came into this particular space, we were still working on the culture at our company. And so we didn't necessarily have all the right people. When I say right people, I mean the right culture fit for our organization. And so we would see, we could find ourselves worrying if people were off working by themselves or two people were off working together. And those were norms that we're having to kind of fight against and to really rethink, an organization was, were they wasting time over there? Because that's not how we particularly would want to go off and work by ourselves. So that's something that we couldn't understand. So this is something that we literally had to work on.
It's just, we talked about this in Work Remote in our last or 2 episodes ago. We talked about work remote and the biases that come along with that. It's the same thing with this. If we, if someone needs to be in a small space with the door closed so that they can get their work done and get the quality of work where it needs to be, because I mean, listen, I won't hide that you and I put a lot of pressure on our leaders as well as our team to make sure that things that they're delivering are of high quality. In order to do that, I have to serve these people in order to be able to do that high quality work. So if I expect someone who needs the quiet time to be able to produce the high quality work in a high traffic area, I'm not making much sense. That's just not logical. So I had to retrain my brain to think about the people that are tucked away in a conference room. I mean, my bias sounded like this. What are they doing in there? Like, are they taking a nap? Like, are they messing around on their phone? I mean, no, they're not. They're not shopping online all day. They're working.
Well, 5 years ago, the answer to that would be sometimes yes.
Yes.
And so that I think it's really important that we stress that, kind of going back to the right people on the right bus, making sure that you have a culture that's clearly defined, and that people understand what's expected of them, so that then you can start to do things like this. I mean, it not only was the way that we set up our work environment, but also our work day. And we really don't have a start and stop time, for example. We once did, and we found ourselves policing that. And I was like, this is not the type of organization this is not the type of thing I want to be doing as a leader, nor do I want other leaders doing this. And so what we do is we allow people to arrive and depart each day based on their life circumstances and how they best work.
Yes.
And again, it took us a while to get there, but what I'm doing by describing this particular example is that we wanted to be in a position to lean into people's preferences and what makes them thrive. But in order to do that, you've got to be very intentional about your culture and getting the right people on the right people on the bus, and then certainly in the right seats. So, and we talk about that to great length at the 2 episodes on culture. So if you want to revisit those, or if you haven't listened yet, you might want to go back to those. And we talk about how we ultimately successfully found our way to where we are today, but with some of the landmines that we walked right through as well.
Totally. And how that sounded for those of you who are listening to this and you're like, maybe I'm like this, maybe I'm having this right now. those types of landmines sounded like this. Well, I have to do this in the morning, so can I just come in like 30 minutes later? And then the answer may be yes, sure. Yeah, like, okay, that sounds good. And then the next person comes into my office and the next person comes in with some kind of exception, which we don't mind the exceptions. It's just managing all of them is damn near impossible. So in order to eliminate it being an exception, Danelle said, why don't we just be flexible and you just come in when you need to come in, get your thing done, drop the kid off. Maybe I was one of those people, I don't remember, but drop your kid off at school, do what you need to do, and then get in here and get to work. You know, I mean, I'm paying you to work. You need to get in here and find time to work. And then you go when you've put in your day's work. So we worried less about when, and we worried more about what you were going to produce and the excellence that was expected out of it. And it's turned out to be worthwhile. That was a worthwhile experiment. And we have a lot less landmines creeping around this office.
Yeah. I mean, we had to figure out what worked best for our organization, and we had to be very intentional in describing the expectations. And once we were able to do that, then we found ourselves with a culture that can support the flexibility that we ultimately always wanted. And it just took us a while that's the way it was in the beginning of our organization, because there was only a handful of us. But as we grew and as a lot more people came into our organization, we found ourselves being in this more restrictive state. And that was not good at all. And that's not what we wanted. And so again, that's what you basically have described here, is that we are in a much more flexible state.
And quite
because
frankly,
we have the right people on the team that protect that.
Right. And
they want that trust and flexibility and autonomy, and which is earned, it's earned, but it's also easy to understand how to earn it at DMA, because we're very, very intentional about describing it.
And then it's easy. That's what I was going to say. Once you get to that point, it becomes the management of it becomes so much easier, because we all understand and we're all in this thing together, versus, oh, I have this one-off request, or, oh, I'm special because I have this other thing. Well, everybody's special. Everybody has needs. Everybody's living their lives in different circumstances. So how do we cater to all? And that's how we did it. And it's awesome. So thank you for that.
In saying that, and I know we need to get on to tip 4, but I just had an idea. We need to probably have a session on the art of the exception. And we need to talk about how leaders can navigate those, but then also how just all of us who are asking for an exception, because that's one of the things. And I think we did talk about it to some extent in some of the previous episodes, but I think it would be good is that their exceptions are going to come up. And I think it's important to learn how to ask for an exception and learn how to accept an exception and learn how to manage them. So anyway, I just think that would be a good idea. So Jordan, get that in the content calendar, please. Thank you, ma'am. All right. Tip number 4, encourage introverts to speak up and encourage introverts to listen. I love this tip from HBR. And we found research that shows how in a typical 6-person meeting, 2 people do more than 60% of the talking. And in bigger groups, the problem only gets worse. And so a good way to encourage introverts to speak up is to ask them to come prepared. And so as leaders and managers, we see the opportunity there is an opportunity for introverts to speak up, but they just may not be inclined to do so. So what we can do is, prior to a meeting, we can certainly let them know what the topic is going to be about, for instance, or to specifically ask them, I would like for you to speak to XYZ in this meeting. I think that's helpful to an introvert. Also, in the same way, prior to a meeting with the extroverts, go, hey, I really want you to take some good notes in this meeting. I'd like for you to be more reflective in here, because I want you to determine, again, XYZ. So I think some preparation to help both the introverts and the extroverts show up in their best way is important. And one of the things that I've learned too is that if extroverts are naturally inclined to on the spot, they can think, they're it's not that the introverts don't think as fast as the extroverts, they just process the information differently typically. And so if introverts are quick to speak up, what you can also do is ask during the meeting, hey, if you have any additional thoughts on this particular topic that we discussed today, please feel free to follow up with me. And what that does is it gives people, both introverted and extroverted, because extroverts can still continue to generate ideas. It gives people the opportunity to reflect on, what was discussed and if the ideas come to them. So it gives people a little bit more room. And again, I think that there are some exchanges or group meetings where that may not be conducive, and I'm completely aware of that. But in most cases, that should be, you should be able to have pre and post exchange with people so that they can, again, be able to reflect and or communicate their ideas or their input. So that's just a way I see that.
So if you're leading an introvert, you said, help them prepare so that they know to speak up. If I'm leading extroverts who are the like you and me, who talk a lot during meetings, the 60% of the time, we suck up 60% of the time of meetings. What's your advice for them if you're leading an extrovert this way?
Yeah, I think the advice is to be more self-aware, AKA smarter, and just recognize when it's time, time to listen or pause. And then honestly, the extroverts can be champions of getting others to speak up when they're aware. They can ask a question of someone else or a follow-up question that could be really helpful. And so one of the things that I've learned as an extrovert is I may be the first to speak on a particular topic or in a particular moment. But I've also learned that through trust, when people trust me and it's a mutual setting of trust, that I can easily ask a question, Marcy, what do you think about that? And she may say, I don't know, I need more time to process that. Or she may come out immediately then because she's thinking about it. So we're thinking at the same speed. It's just how we're communicating externally is where the difference comes in. And she's a perfect example of that. And having worked with Marcy and McKinsey as long as we have, I can see their wheels turning and I know that there's gold in there. And so I may start, like I said, but then it's really important that I'm self-aware enough to go, okay, your idea is not where the gold comes from. You may start it, but let's ask others. And so again, because they trust our environment, they know that they can speak up and it doesn't have to be this polished, perfect answer because we don't, we really try to keep our environment being emotionally and psychologically safe for people to speak up and it not need to be perfect every single time. So there's another layer that goes into the way we engage at DMA. But that's what I would say is that extroverts just need to understand that others in the room bring value and to be aware of when they might be talking too much. So.
That's right. Are you listening to that, extroverts? We need to be quiet. She's telling us to be quiet. And this was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn. Not necessarily be quiet. I mean, but to reserve sometimes. Like you just, you said earlier, extroverts process out loud, introverts process internally. So if I'm constantly processing out loud, when am I going to give somebody else? And that's what you're trying to say. Give someone else an opportunity to speak. For me, it was actually McKinsey who taught me a really tough lesson that brought me into awareness about it. And she said to me, you're so interesting in meetings because you're silly. She said that you can be very silly, and she just wants to get down to business, and I'm here to have fun. I'm here to have fun while we earn money, you know what I mean? And make a good living and do good work. And so, but when she said that, I had to think, I was kind of like, it was jarring at first, but then I was like, oh, I think what she's saying is we're different. I show up different. She shows up different. And if I'm going to expect her to speak up more, she's going to expect me to tone it down a little bit. And that's the thing with the tricky part about extroverts is they typically do bring the enthusiasm and the candor to the business or to meetings or to, it's like when you're standing on an elevator, when the doors close, you can always tell the extroverts because they cannot sit there and stand there in silence with another human on the elevator with them. And so we can be a major diversion. When you think about it from a business setting, we can be frustrating as hell to the introverts. And I know because I've been told that, like from our introverts that we trust, man, you just got to get to the point. You just got to get to the point. So teaching the extroverts to listen, reflect, and become open and aware of other people's perspectives, the way that other people behave and get jazzed up with energy in order to do better work versus just our own, that is the lesson. And so at DMA, and you know who coined this. I don't know exactly. It was an author. It's radical candor. It's steamrolling.
Okay.
The steamrolling.
Kim Scott.
Kim Scott. Yes. Is who I see. Once she brought me into awareness about that, that's how I've envisioned it. I was like, I am literally a steamroller in this room right now, and I need to shut up. Just like stop, Megan. Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And listen, it's a balancing act. And McKinsey, pointed out that, there's a difference to me in being silly and steamrolling. And because I can see the opposite. I can see, the opposite of that is the meeting is so damn boring and so buttoned up that no one enjoys going. And so I can see the other side of it. But there's a balancing act between so silly and so serious, at least at our company. I mean, we're a marketing agency that thrives on creativity. Yeah. So I think we need both, but it's up to us as leaders and individuals to know when we're crossing the line potentially. And that's where the art of self-awareness and knowledge comes in. And so again, I think we need to, as leaders, know what our tendencies are and how we're naturally wired. We need to also know what we're working on. So for instance, for you and I is to make sure that we're holding space for others and then we're inviting others' ideas to accommodate ours, that we're asking good questions. That's as two extroverts. And that, that we're making sure that we understand our team and what makes them most comfortable. And quite frankly, what are they working on? And helping the introverts understand when they need to have a more extroverted tendency, especially as they're developing as leaders. And then also, again, we talked a lot about helping the extroverts. So in the last few minutes, but I think that's just what's really important is to have a good foundation for the way things are, the way people are, so that then you can grow from there. And I think, again, this is part of the Self-Smarter journey, is accepting us and others for who they are, and everyone being in a position of wanting to just be a better version of themselves. And this is part of that process. So
what would you say for sure about introverts, about leading introverts and extroverts?
I mean, again, I think it's going to be a bit of a recap of what we've talked about, but I mean, don't assume you already know everything. And I think, again, making the statements that introverts are very misunderstood and extroverts are very stereotyped. Both of them can be one way or the other. But I think, let's educate ourselves. There's a lot of really great, if you're a super extroverted person, listen or read the book Quiet. And that's by Susan Cain. And, there's so many resources out there that can help us. And so I would definitely say what I know for sure is we need to learn more about this, because these are things that can easily be assumed that we know. Oh, introverts are the quiet ones, extroverts are the loud ones. No, let's not stop there. Let's learn more about how each are wired and really how they thrive and what their preferences are. And I don't know that, we need to as leaders, I know we've shared this about our own organization, but we need to balance social spaces with private ones and in the workspace for sure. And that also relative to time. And so I think we have to think about that as leaders and organizations and get the input. I know that, for us as two extroverted leaders, the input from our organization, which turns out is 50% introverted, that we need to have a greater understanding. And, we were able to do that by open dialogue and certainly through our one-on-one meetings with our teams, but also through our surveys that we've talked a lot about on this podcast. We use a service called Tiny Pulse and highly recommend it. Don't let certain dominant personalities do all the talking. I mean, that's definitely something I know for sure. And definitely make sure that the person who may not be speaking up as much, give them an opportunity to do so and find out how that person, it would receive that request best. So definitely, again, hold space for both the extroverts and the introverts. And I think the one that blankets all of it is to give extroverts the ability to socialize while giving introverts the opportunity to isolate if they need to. And so again, that goes back to being aware. It also goes back to being flexible, and it goes also into being intentional with time and space. So those are the things that I know that we have worked through in learning more about this and these particular types, and also accepting the fact that the most healthy version of ourselves is probably when we're able to balance both our natural tendency, whatever that may be, with the one that we need to be more intentional with. So for me, my natural tendency is extrovertedness, and I'm being more intentional with my introvertedness at this chapter in my life. So
thank you, Danelle.
That's what I know for sure.
Thank you. Those are all very, very helpful. And in fact, I've learned something today. So I'll remember to take your words and your advice and what you know for sure, things we should be doing more of. That's really what I took away from that. So I will take your advice and do that.
Good.
Let's transition to music. Yes. And let's be honest, this is what we really, want to talk about. We want to talk about introverts and extroverts, but let's just be honest. So in New York, when you're in New York, you're in a very creative headspace. We talked about that earlier.
Yep. Yes. And the city has that effect. And what I've noticed about myself in this city too is music. Well, music's a big part of every one of my days. But it's definitely a place where I can come and really explore new things. And so I definitely love what New York City does for my music. It's a music muse for me, is the way I would describe it.
Well, I can tell. I mean, I know that for many reasons, but I know this is what I know for sure. Yes. You've been talking about Maggie Rogers, which I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot with this, but I don't know. We haven't debriefed on Maggie Rogers, but at this time, it would be very nice if you told me a little bit about Maggie Rogers, and shared some glorious news about her.
Okay. Well, the reason why Megan is teeing this up is because I have a habit with her of just sending music and be like, stop what you're doing and listen to this. Yes. Now, probably not the best idea since she's running the company day to day, but I'm like, this song is amazing. And so I've mentioned this before, big fan of Spotify, big fan. One of the things that I love is I think the algorithm of Spotify it's so
awesome,
rich. It's just so incredible. And so I love Maggie Rogers, and I'm going to tell you why in a minute, but she has a new album out, and the album dropped literally the day I got to New York, and I've been here for a minute. So, but the album is out and it's brand new. So I didn't know much about Maggie Rogers, but she just released her second studio album. So prior to that, my favorite song was Lights On or Leave the Light On. I can't remember. We'll put the link in the show note, but I love the song. And one day I was talking to Mackie about it, and I was just like, I've been listening to more of her music. And what Spotify does is when they know that you listen to a particular artist, they will feed you when they have new releases. And before this album dropped, she released a few singles. And so Spotify was like, oh, Maggie Rogers has a new single out. And so when Mackie and I were traveling this summer, I said, oh, look, there's a new Maggie Rogers single out. And we listened to it. And she goes, Mackie, my daughter, said, she went to NYU. And so Mackie started telling me this story about Maggie Rogers studied at the Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music, which is part of the Tisch School of Arts here, like I'm in NYU, but I'm in the city, at NYU. And her claim to fame was that she was in a master class with Pharrell, so the artist Pharrell. And there is a YouTube video, which you must watch. It is so special. And so it's just her in the class with Pharrell. And what they're doing is they're listening to each of the artist's songs that they had to record themselves, and they're playing it for him. And so here is this, I don't know, she's probably 19 or 20 years old. I think she was a junior when this happened at NYU. And the exchange between the two of them is so special. Him hearing this song for the very first time, her sitting there next to him. And so she's doing these precious side glances, like wondering what
Like,
he's
what do you
thinking,
think?
having no idea. Yeah, exactly. And she's like picking at her fingers, and you can tell she's
Aw.
so nervous, but she's literally into her own music so much. The song is Alaska, and it's what put her on the map. In fact, in 2019, it's the song that put her into the Grammy. She was nominated for a Grammy for Best New Artist. But I will tell you, the exchange, it's just what I love about songwriters and music makers they're making their own music and they're giving it to someone. And rarely do you get to see that exchange. We get to enjoy the polished version of it on what our streaming service or wherever we buy the music or the record, and then or maybe we get the pleasure of seeing it live. But I love this video so much, and Mackie was telling me about it, and I listened to it, so I fell in love with her. So to say that I'm excited about our new album, I've just been excited. And she writes all of her own music, and so the album finally drops, and she's doing this interviews about the album, and what I learned that I find to be so amazing. So she wrote most of this album during COVID. And she joined a writing group, and these writers, for 5 or 6 weeks during COVID, they had to write a song every day. So they chose the weeks throughout that time period of 2020, 2021, where they were going to write a song every day, and they just had to submit it, not together, but individually write a song. So during this process, she wrote over 100 songs.
Whoa.
I mean, that blows me away.
For sure.
Now, remember, Maggie Rogers now is 28 years old.
Let's try.
Yeah, exactly, or a verse. And she wrote this music, and we're going to put another link in the show notes where she does this interview with Zane Lowe. And I love y'all probably, most of our listeners may know of him. He's famous for interviewing musical artists. And she quotes, she says to him, this is 28-year-old, that there's nothing more than intention when she's talking about her music. And she's like, I want to make music where it feels like someone cared. And I found that to be profound thinking for a 28-year-old. And it quite frankly, gives me great hope. And she goes on to say that this album, Surrender, I forgot to tell you that the album's name is Surrender, and that it's 100% about her personal life. And if you think about it, she was like the rest of us, sequestered, during COVID, and she went to Maine and to do all of this writing. And she said this album was so vulnerable because there was no public life to write about. And she said it was about me and my fears, my love life, my friends, my anger, and my joy. And this is her saying this to the Zane Lowe, and to me, by saying that about our own work, and she does say that this album no longer belongs to me once it was released. It belongs to the listener. And to me, that embodies Self Smarter. And so not only is the album incredible, and I'm going to say right now, the music, the lyrics, the arrangement is so special. I will give a little PSA. There's some explicit parts to it, so just you might want to give it a listen if you're going to play in the car with some kiddos. There's some explicit parts, but it is so incredible, and I just had to share it because I am, again, this is my latest music crush, and I find her to be fascinated. This is her second studio album, and I think it's a masterpiece, and I wanted to share it with our listeners and anybody else who'll open my text that I've been blowing up their phones over.
Yeah.
So
yes, thank you for sharing that. Now I get it, because you have been blowing me up with it, and I need to sit down and listen to the album. The last time you were this way was about Adele's album. Mm-hmm. I can't remember which one was first. It was either Adele's new album or Brandy's new album, Broken Horses. But both of those albums are amazing, and on several different levels. So this one must be a zinger. So I can't wait. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Adele's album dropped first and 30, and then it was Brandy's In These Silent Days. And I haven't been touched by an album since then. in this way.
That's right.
And I think it's a collection of incredibly emotional stories about life from a 28-year-old who seems to have already lived 60 years. And so it speaks to me as if it were a friend of mine writing it, or if I could have that talent and could describe some of the feelings that I'm feeling right now. If I could, these were the words that I would want to be on paper. So that's it. I think it's a masterpiece.
Okay.
And I'm anxious to hear what our listeners think about it. So
okay. Well, we'll all get to listening and we'll share with you. Danelle will report back on what we think. I'm sure Jesse will put up a link to the album on Instagram in stories. So
Sure.
keep looking out for that. But of course, we'll have all these links from today's episode, as well as a link to Maggie's videos and her music right in our show notes, available to you at any time. And for more information, just remember to visit our website, selfsmarterpodcast.com.
Yes.
Before we go, Danelle and I want to send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone.
See you next week.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.